Well, we know that this executive order has now been signed by the president, meaning that financial and visa sanctions are now in place on individuals and their family members who assist in ICC investigations of US citizens or US allies. It should be noted that this indeed does come on the back of that Democratic bloc of a Republican effort to sanction the International Criminal Court. Of course, the US is not a member of the ICC and doesn't pay attention to its jurisdiction, but the reason for that was because they wanted to arrest Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister of Israel, and the Americans now pushing back against this. And the sanctions that have been put in place, we are told, could well cripple the court. In December, the court's president warned that sanctions would, quote, rapidly undermine the court's operations in all situations and cases and jeopardize its very existence. So this executive order likely to be a real stark threat to the ICC, and Donald Trump really drawing a line in the sand here.
And Fraser, shortly before we came on air, a federal judge blocked Trump's plan to push out federal employees by offering them financial incentives. What's the latest there?
So a judge in Boston has blocked this order now until a review can be held on Monday. This order that Donald Trump had put out to federal workers to effectively partake in a buyout scheme had been due to take effect at midnight this evening. We know that of the over 2 million people in the federal workforce, we know 40,000 people have taken this buyout offer of pay until the end of September in return for leaving their position. It came after Donald Trump sent an order to a lot of people who had been working from home or been on a distance working orders. They were ordered to come back to the office or to take this payout, and indeed a significant chunk of them have. Well, the White House is now spinning this, saying that this actually could be something positive for them. This delay, they're seeing it basically as a way to increase the number of resignations by extending the deadline. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, said, quote, "We are grateful to the judge for extending the deadline so more federal workers who refuse to show up to the office can take the administration up on this very generous once-in-a-lifetime offer." Now, the White House says that these buyouts are meant to save the US taxpayer millions by reducing the size of the federal workforce. But Caroline did also say that they could replace those people with people who are better suited for the job. Now, it should also be pointed out that there has been a worry that Donald Trump has been trying to stack the government with loyalists, and indeed he's had some help creating a pool of potential talent from the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank here in DC. They were the people who authored that Project 2025 that we heard so much about during the campaign. Donald Trump, of course, said he didn't know anything about Project 2025, but so far his presidency has been taking quite a few pages out of its book.
And Fraser, we spoke about the agency earlier in the week. We're now seeing that USAID, it's going to be keeping just under 300 of its 10,000 staff around the world. You've been speaking, I believe, with a senior former official at the agency.
Yes, so USAID is the independent agency that the US government had money from the US government to help foreign aid projects abroad effectively. There were 10,000 people working at that organization, which funded critical life-saving missions for a lot of vaccination campaigns and things across the world, and it was a whole host of things that they covered. Well, the New York Times is now learning from 3 sources familiar that the 10,000 people there are going to effectively be fired, and just 290 of those 10,000 jobs will still be in the agency, and more than 800 contracts that the agency had with foreign aid programs will also be cancelled. This, of course, has caused turmoil within the agency, and a lot of people have already been fired in the recent days. I spoke to one person who left the agency just before Donald Trump came into office, but she has worked for Donald Trump before under the White House during his first term. Take a listen to what she said to me earlier.
Under President Obama first, and then was there as part of the handover team to ensure that we had a peaceful transition of power and that we could make sure that our foreign policy priorities that keep America safe were able to actually continue. So in that role, I was his senior person for Africa. And so for President Trump, for 7 months, I sat in his Africa office at the National Security Council. And what that meant is it was things like, how did we determine whether or not Sudan should stay high on the state sponsor of terrorism lists? How were we going to think about drone strikes in Somalia or Libya? What were we going to do if there was any sort of health emergency that happened in any of the 53 countries that fell under my purview?
A lot of people this time around have said that they feel this new Trump administration is different this time around. He knows where the buttons are, he knows where the levers of power are. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that was different is that he kept me on. At the White House. As a career civil servant who started my career originally under George Bush in 2006, he knew that my loyalty lied with the United States. He has not done that this time. And the reason why we stuck around last time is because it's important to know what we had done before and what had happened. And this time, when the team came into the White House, they actually sent everybody home. For USAID specifically, pulling all staff back is ridiculous. We have programming through USAID in 80 countries all over the world. I think that some of this programming could be things like giving people medications, whether it's HIV or AIDS medication, whether it's tuberculosis medication. It could be humanitarian assistance. It could be working with the Department of Energy on how to negotiate a better deal with China on energy or critical minerals. And all those people who live there with their families and their whole lives are just told to pack up in 5 days, to pack up and pull their kids out of school, pull their kids out of sports. Their spouses are having to quit jobs. They have pets. Their whole lives they're there. And they say you have 5 days and you're coming back.
Republicans now argue that USAID should focus more on food assistance and humanitarian assistance. For context, that was about 40% of USAID's 2023 budget. What do you think is missing out of what the mission should be for USAID in your view?
One of the problems with only thinking about humanitarian assistance is it's a Band-Aid. Humanitarian assistance is not going to stop the war in Sudan. It is not going to stop fighting in Burma. The things that are actually going to make a difference are that long-term development.
In that theme, there's been a worry about other nations stepping into the voids that's going to be left by the United States stepping back. How do you feel about that, and which nations do you think are going to step into that gap?
The type of development that China and Russia does is very different than what the United States does and what Europe does. And I think examples of this are, economic deals with China that end up putting countries in huge amounts of debt. One of the neat things that we were doing at USAID is under an initiative that actually was kicked off under the first Trump administration, Prosper Africa. This is an initiative that actually helped U.S. businesses to come in and negotiate different agreements with countries. We would send energy experts all over East Africa to help so that when Kenya or Ethiopia is negotiating an energy deal with China, they have an expert who's there who can help them negotiate a better deal with China. None of that stuff is going to be happening anymore. When it comes to Russia, Russia comes in and is, they are thugs in the way that they do their assistance. That is through mis and disinformation. It is just massive amounts of information warfare. When you see the U.S. retreat, I think everyone is going to be very nervous. It's a pretty big gap for other countries to fill. And I am really worried about it. I am worried about the ability of the international community to pull together to try and do this. I hope they do, because I think that we are a better world when we try and take care of each other.
Fraser, thanks for joining us with all of that. We'll leave it there for now. That's Fraser Jackson, our correspondent in Washington.